Something I've always hated is how simple the answers are to life's most difficult problems. You're depressed about your current condition? Just express gratitude and be present. You're struggling financially? Just keep applying to jobs, save more money, or solve a problem and be an entrepreneur. You can't find love? You just gotta love yourself first, bro. Well, gee, thanks, that certainly sounds good in theory, but actually figuring out how to execute on these answers is the reason that my mind tortures itself. And especially in our modern era, where mental illness is this generation's bubonic plague, feeling like it's worth it to exert the energy to pursue a better life can only be experienced once in a blue moon. Unless you start to adopt what I've been doing for the past couple years now. When I first started making these YouTube videos, I didn't have much of a way to stretch my creativity. A lot of you still don't know this, but I was actually a fitness channel for a long time up until the midway point of 2020. And there's a lot of different things you can do in fitness, such as meal ideas, workout routines, and exploring the science behind exercise. But to me, it felt like there was an aspect of making videos that was missing. I knew I wanted an excuse to get out in the world, to film more than just the plates in my kitchen and in the gym, and to capture the beauty of all aspects of life. And when I finally had my breakout, which was that 90-day no-fap plus journaling plus cold showers video, I had the ability to do just that. Shooting B-roll for these videos has shown me parts of the cities I've lived in that I'd never think of going to, and plenty of unknown coves and crevices in nature, all of which have undeniably improved my skills as a filmmaker. But something that you don't see in my videos is the time spent in between my B-roll shots. When I'm setting up the camera, thinking of which path I should go down next, and just basking in the sun that makes me perspire until my shirt is damp. In that silent time alone during the shoot, all my problems, like where my missing SD card is, or that comment about my half-ass beard that really got to me, or that text that I sent to my girlfriend that I think might have came off as strange, suddenly cease to matter. I'm telling this story because being in those situations where I've had to record B-roll induced two of the most purposeful states one can be in to make their lives more enjoyable. And the two ways I've done that, without consciously realizing it until I had thought about it while chilling in nature, are the state of flow and the state of depth. When I'm in the thick of a recording session, there is nothing that is separating my camera and I. It's as if the chasm between mechanical and biological breaks, and my concept of self dissipates into the activity. You might have felt a similar way before when doing a challenging activity as well. Like when you're playing a sport and each minute feels more like a couple seconds, or when you're writing some code and you're so immersed into the project that when you finally lift your head, it's 5 p.m. and you haven't eaten yet. If you've ever been or felt this state of condition before, you know it can be one of the most blissful experiences that you can produce in the human condition. And that experience is what we call flow state. A flow state is that in the zone feeling where the purpose of life is positively reverberating through the task you are trying to accomplish. As Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi put it in his book, Flow, the best moments in our lives are not the passive, receptive, relaxing times. The best moments usually occur if a person's body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. So there are a lot of factors that go into what triggers flow state, but it can generally be boiled down into 5 steps. Reduce internal distractions, eliminate external distractions, use conditioning triggers, have a clearly defined task, and make sure the task is in the discomfort sweet spot. Before we start to approach the task that we're going to define, we must make sure that the chances of something coming up that take us out of flow state are minimized. So what I like to do before a session of flow is this visualization meditation practice. I will picture myself being in flow state and what I will be doing during it. I'll visualize in my mind exactly what it would look like to be effortlessly focusing on my arduous activity and how it would feel to be within that state. And then for 5 minutes, I will do nothing but solely focus on the inward and outward of my breath. After that, having my mind get to the state where it's silent enough to focus and to get into flow is way easier. The next step is to eliminate all external distractions as well. A requirement for you to even reach the flow state is for you to be doing that task for at least 10 to 20 minutes, and only then can you actually reach that state. There's this buffering period that you're gonna face where you feel some slight agitation and resistance to the task you're trying to do right before you get into the middle of it. And if you have loads of distractions on hand that make it easy for you to give up on that resistance, then flow will be impossible to achieve. Luckily, when I'm out in the world shooting B-roll, there's really no distractions for me to escape to, except for when someone comes up to me or if I pull out my phone. But if your activity requires you to be at, say, your computer or other desk setup, there's gonna be endless ways to get distracted from your work. I'm not gonna go into this part in detail since I've talked about it in a lot of previous videos, but what I do when I'm writing or editing, just sitting at my desk, I will lock myself out of my phone completely, as well as as all websites that aren't related to my work using a Chrome extension. And the app I use to lock myself out of everything is called Forest, and the Chrome extension that I use is called Stay Free. Now for this next step, which is using conditioning triggers, I want to tell you a story which is one of the first things that you learn in a psychology class in college. There was a Russian neurologist named Ivan Pavlov who was experimenting with dogs to understand behaviors in mammals. He noticed that every time they were given their food, they would start salivating. This piqued his interest, so he wanted to see if he could get the dogs to salivate on command using other things. He decided to ring a bell every time he presented the dogs with food so that they would start associating the bell with getting food. And eventually, the dogs would start to salivate every time he rang the bell, even if they weren't presented with food at all. This is what is known as classical conditioning, and it's something that we can use with the right triggers to help us more easily fall into flow state. If we condition ourselves with the right things outside of the actual activity that we want to do with flow states, then every time we use one of these triggers, our brains will say to us, okay, it's time to get into flow state now. There are some really common useful triggers such as working at the same time in the day every day, and listening to the right music can be helpful too, but the most useful trigger that I've used lately that also changes our biology is a little bit of caffeine. Drinking a little bit of caffeine before a flow state activity has been shown to increase dopamine and norepinephrine, which drives attention into the present moment and stimulates cortisol and epinephrine, which prepares your body to exert yourself. So not only is caffeine a flow state cheat code, but the smell, taste, and sound of it can all act as the equivalent as the bell in the Pavlov experiments. I can vouch that I will never go back to using coffee on a regular basis, as it's just too much caffeine for me, and it gives me a lot of anxiety. So that is why I have been using this stuff, which is today's sponsor, Mudwater. Before Mudwater even reached out to me asking me if they wanted to sponsor the channel, I had used them in the past and I really liked it more than coffee. It's this blend of masala chai, cacao, mushrooms, and these powerful plants known as adaptogens. It has a fraction of the amount of caffeine as a cup of coffee per serving, which is even less than a cup of black tea, so I basically don't even really see it as a thing to rely on for energy. The way I see it is as a health drink with just a tiny bit of caffeine to start the flow momentum. If you've ever had something like a turmeric tea or just seasoned any of your food with turmeric, it has that sort of earthy flavor with a hint of cinnamon to it, and I personally love making it by just pouring some boiling water over the powder and using the frother that came with the morning ritual starter kit. That thing is fun as hell to use, I'm not gonna lie. And just to make sure its effects are never dulled and I don't get strongly attached to it, although I don't even think that could happen with how little caffeine it has in it, I will take one day off a week from drinking it and one whole week off per quarter of the year, so that way it always works and always helps me get into flow. If you're still drinking coffee and you're addicted and you want a healthier, stabler alternative that won't have your hands shaking, your heart racing, and you crashing by 5 p.m., you should definitely check out Mudwater. Yeah! You can go to mudwater.com/Cole, that is mudwtr.com/Cole, and you will get a special offer if you use that link. It is $20 off their morning ritual starter kit, which comes with a bunch of little goodies, the actual Mudwater itself, and that frother that's really fun to use completely for free, which is a $60 value. Go take advantage of the offer, ditch coffee, and use something better like this, and using that link will help support my channel as well, and hopefully Mudwater will sponsor me again because of it. Now, once all of that is set up, I can finally start to define what I'm about to do. Sometimes when I'm sitting at my desk, I won't have a clearly defined goal and outcome for that goal, and every single time I don't. Half of the time that could be spent working is usually spent figuring out what I should be doing. Before I go into every flow session, I will write out what I want to achieve using this prompt. For this flow session, I will be doing activity. What I would like to complete through this activity is goal. So for example, for this flow session, I will be recording B-roll for my next video. And what I would like to accomplish in this session is enough B-roll recorded for half of my video. And the reason I say that I only want enough B-roll to fill up half of the video has everything to do with the next step, which is that discomfort sweet spot. I've had instances where I thought I'd have enough time to get all my B-roll completed after finishing the script, only to realize it's 6 p.m. and the sun goes down at 7. happen. In those scenarios where I'm rushing and stressing about how difficult it's going to be to rush through all that B-roll in time, it's much harder to get into flow state. And that is because it doesn't hit that discomfort sweet spot. There's a spot in between stress and relaxation where your brain is engaged enough with a task for it to not be boring, but doesn't find it too challenging to the point where you can't make progress in it. And that is the optimal state for getting into flow. So depending on how much workload you think you can handle, you may need to scale back the amount of work that you thought you could finish in that allotted time period that you're going to set for flow, just so it's not too difficult, but also not too easy. These days, I'm making sure that I'm doing at least one flow state inducing activity a day for around 1 to 3 hours. And since I've been doing this, especially if I can get myself to do it first thing in the morning, I find that the rest of my day is so much more satisfying and fulfilling no matter what happens. And I promise you, it's gonna do the same for you. Flow state is a massively underrated anomaly for our current culture of hyperstimulation, but even with that sense of accomplishment and presentness, I find myself occasionally susceptible to the clutches of reality. When you're entrapped in a large city with nothing but buses spewing out pollution, cars lined up with angry, overworked individuals, and people whom you walk by in the street that refuse to make eye contact with you or pop a smile, you can easily start to get caught in the whirlwind of repetitive normalcy. When nothing makes sense, and the little sense we are all trying to make of this human experience only produces further thoughts of insignificance and frustration, it can be extremely difficult to find reasons to continue moving onward into an unknowable future. But when I'm shooting B-roll, I start to see things in a different lens. What I'm doing when I decide to partake in the act of shooting videos is I am capturing a series of moments. It is my job to catch all of these moments of life and piece them together into a coherent format that makes you want to keep watching. And by doing so, I am embarking on the act of creating a series of great, useful moments, which, now that I've reflected on it, means I'm really just creating a miniature version of a purposeful life. Things don't feel worth it or sensible right now because you haven't captured enough of a certain moment that I'm trying to create within my shots. And that is the mind state that produces the thought of, maybe there is something great out there for me. If you can produce that thought just once a day, but ideally more than once a day, then the juice of life will feel like it's worth the squeeze. This is why I started off talking about the state of flow, because it's usually directly after a flow session that producing this thought becomes the easiest. But you need to find that thought in the realm of life that most speaks to you. It's not gonna magically fall into your lap so long as you keep searching, like a gambler who finally hits the jackpot and attributes it to never giving up instead of luck. No, you must create that thing by capturing more moments of your life, not by waiting around and hoping it will happen. I do not care how idealistic the term "there's something out there for everyone" is, because it's 100% true. You're probably young as hell if you clicked on this video and you think that you should have things figured out already and that you shouldn't feel so doom and gloom about the world. But the very fact that you feel these things and you are actively seeking a solution means you're already in the process of creating that purpose. There is so much out there trying to distract you from the 1 or 2 things that you need to focus on in depth and replicate to produce the thought of, maybe there is something great out there for me more. But it's only gonna come when you deeply engage in something for days, weeks, or years undistracted. Once you find or create an activity or moment that produces the thought of, maybe there is something great out there for me, which you will, you need to write down everything about it. Create a story out of what you just witnessed, felt, or did. And constantly remind yourself that those stories are to be found more and more in the future, so long as you can commit yourself to living more deeply within those types of stories. Because all that life really is a series of moments. Or as Joey Schweitzer, creator of the Better Ideas YouTube channel, put it, your life is just today repeated. All it takes is enough todays filled with the thought of, maybe there is something great out there for me, and acting upon that thought to comprise a purposeful and fulfilling life. And here I am ending the video with a simple answer, which is what I said I wouldn't do. But I guess once you've traveled to enough depths, you find that the answer can be found on the surface too. Thank you patrons on Patreon. If you don't know what this is, it's a platform where I put out exclusive content and you can talk to me on the phone over there. If you want to check that out, link in the description. If this video produced the thought of maybe there is something great out there for me, then maybe this video will produce another thought of similar taste. So go check it out. I think you'll like it. And that is all for this video. I love you guys. Peace.